You mentioned, Ben, in the last episode that you grew up in Cumbria. I also did that. Whereabouts are you from?
So I'm from Lancaster, so
Lancaster,
Lancashire.
right? Yeah.
But Dad, because my parents are separated, and my dad lives and has done for the last kind of 15 years in Kendal, and then a little. Well, first it was a little place called Sedbergh,
Oh, I know Seba.
and
Yeah,
then Kendal.
nice. I spent a bit of time
So
in
when I'm
Kendal as a
back
kid.
from university, Kendal's where I'm heading back to.
Mm.
So Sedbergh is where, though I've obviously called it Little Hodbury, but all the places in my collection are based in some way on places in Sedbergh.
Ah,
Obviously,
fascinating.
I play around with the geography, obviously, and I do my
Yeah.
own thing. But it was kind of like in my head, I'm going, yes, I can remember the villager that I'm now killing.
So, off the back of that, who inspired you to start telling your own stories?
I mean, I think I've always had that kind of, I think, that mind, in the sense that, I mean, it's in some ways I was the fairly stereotypical nerdy bullied kid. In the, I would struggle with friendships. I would find them kind of quite tiring. I struggled to make friends. Often lunchtimes I'd want to read instead. And I think I do remember kind of often they were worlds of someone else's devising. So I'd be coming up with a Doctor Who story or something. But I do remember kind of just kind of going, well, I don't really have any friends to play with, so I'll just do it. I'll create my own story in my head and act it out over lunchtime. So I think I've always had that sensibility. But then I suppose there's also a part of me that goes, well, when you grow up in a house with a horror author as a dad, and so you spend a lot of your time looking at his bookshelf, going, I think I don't think it's necessarily kind of preordained, but it's kind of like I think I would have almost been surprised if I didn't, to some degree, at least, kind of
Have a
wonder what it
go.
was all about. I
Yeah.
know when Uneasy Beginnings came about, that was because I almost nagged Dad into doing a collection. I kind of said, "Can we do something together? Can we do something together? Can we do something together?" And I think he kind of buckled and went, "Okay, I'll read it." And to his own slightly gritted teeth, he went, "Yeah, they're quite good, aren't they?" I think, yeah, a mixture of, I've always had that kind of that mind, but also living in a house with a horror author as a dad and actually a stepmom as well. It sort of becomes inevitable, maybe.
Have you ever thought about trying for a Who novel job?
I
I
mean,
think it sounds like you've got it in you.
I mean, I would love to. I mean, I'd love to do the TV series. One day. It's one of those ones where, I've got, not who's going to notice little old me, but and I love Doctor Who to bits, but at the moment it is in a very strange place in that it seems to be recalibrating an awful lot.
Yeah.
And so actually at the moment I don't think I'd want to write for it, simply because I don't know what's happening and I'd rather write for something that I can be confident about.
You could
Which
write a whole
foe?
season. You could write a whole season, and then you have
Yeah.
complete control
I mean, if
over.
they're willing to pay me to do that, I mean, more the
You might
fool them, but at the same time, I'd be willing to.
you might have to do that one on spec. But
Yeah,
power
I
to
mean,
you.
I know what I want to write about if I ever did a Doctor Who story. They
I
were
was going
some
to
of the
say
first
which
ideas I ever wrote
foe?
down. Were Doctor Who ideas, and a lot of my story ideas are, to some degree, started out was, oh, I wonder if that could be X, Y, Z, and I've kind of gone, no, that's not a Doctor Who story idea. That's a horror story idea, and gone off with it. Yeah, I think. To write for it in any format would be a dream come true.
So we know you're a Whovian. But do you feel connected to any particular other cultures or subcultures? And if you do, has that shaped your writing at all?
I mean, I regard myself as an unofficial 70s kid.
Okay.
In that, often I will, I'm I like a lot of TV shows and things that are coming out now, but I'm far more familiar, both in terms of movies and TV, with series like Blake Seven, Terry Nation's Survivors. Often all these things have they have various links to Doctor Who. So that's maybe how I find out about them. But I think I feel far more comfortable in some ways watching a 60s, 70s TV show like The Avengers. In fact, here in my uni room, I've got Blake Seven posters, Hammer posters, as well as the plethora of Doctor Who things as well.
So when you say comfortable watching things like that, what is it you find? Do you think that you find really comfortable about the 70s and the sort of approach to art and media from that time?
I think they feel very British, and I think I'm in some ways very British in that I do, as I say, when I say I'm a 70s kid, it's kind of like when you wear waistcoats and bow ties and things, you do sometimes look like you're out of time a bit now.
Mm.
So part of me looks at that and goes, "Ooh, look at all those people with waistcoats and things, and look how normal it is." So I think partly that. I think partly just a lot of the things. I obviously classic Doctor Who extends as far back as 1963. So I think I watched that, and I almost loved that more than the modern series, and then went, well, let's look at all the stuff around it. I've got my brain kind of works like a spider diagram. It's kind of, I can't necessarily think of something straight away, but I can kind of follow the links to get to something.
Yeah.
My dad's a really big fan of Doctor Who, so I feel like he's going to like this episode when he listens to it. Do you have a favourite episode?
I mean, it depends on what day you ask me. At the moment, my favourite Doctor is John Pertwee. Velvet jackets, frilled shirts, bow ties, Venusian Aikido, the whole malarkey. I just adore it. I think at the moment my favourite story would be Inferno, which is one where the Doctor ends up in a parallel universe where everybody is slowly turning into these weird werewolf creatures because of a liquid that's being drawn out of the Earth's core. And it's the first time you actually, because it's a parallel world, you actually see the world end.
And that's the backstory for Monster Energy drinks, isn't it? If I'm correct in my, they
Have you
are.
got the
They're
have you got the
from
deep lore?
yeah, they're
I
from the
mean,
core of the earth, and they're ruining us all, turning us into monsters.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know, but all I'm saying is I've never drunk a Monster Energy drink, and if it's true, I now really don't want to.
Yeah, just don't bother, man. Energy drinks, it's just a waste of time. It's not a good idea.
No, so I think it's just been one of those things that's been with me for as long as I can remember, and so I almost think in that way. I mean, I know it has its problems. It's it was very slow on feminism. You look at some performances and you go, how on earth did they get away with that? Because they're yellow face or some of the dialogue. I know it's not perfect. I don't look at it with kind of rose tinted glasses, but I think I do, I suppose, look at it slightly and go, a lot of the dramas that came out of there, I'd feel far more comfortable writing for or kind of thinking within than I would sometimes, I suppose, do now.
Yeah.
Mm.
Does it extend to music, your 60s and 70s vibe?
Yes. Also, I don't want him to get an ego if he hears this, but, I can blame my dad for an awful lot of things like that in terms of, he'd go, right, I'm going to make you listen to the Beatles or whatever. And I liked it. And so I am very definitely his son in that sense. And so there is a lot of, I suppose, yes, it feels a bit harsh to say blame him, but I can blame him for a
Can
lot
lay
of
it in store, yeah.
No,
You mentioned that you went through a leather jacket phase. Did you ever eschew the 70s music and move into a different period? Did you start listening to I don't know, Skrillex or something for a bit?
no, I've never done that. I mean, I find that I never particularly like. There are a couple of artists whose discography I like the majority of, but actually I tend to find usually one song. Like
Mm.
it's almost like it's not that the artist doesn't matter, but often I bet it's just I tend to like the song and so put it in my playlist. I don't go, oh, I like that song, I'll look at their entire work like I necessarily do with film and TV. I suppose out
Yeah.
of the three mediums, it's the one I'm a bit lesser about.
Do you have just further to the next question? Do you have like a favorite band from the 70s or a favorite track from the 70s?
I mean, you can't go wrong with the Beatles, can you?
No, probably not.
I mean, not necessarily 60s, 70s, a bit later, but ELO have a very classical. Even though they're not 60s, 70s, I think they have a very 60s, 70s feel about them.
Yeah.
And so I do like ELO. Yeah, as I say, it's often like usually one song. So Doors, I'm fond of. No, I'm trying to picture my playlist in my head now.
No,
David
I mean,
Bowie.
oh yeah, a bit of Bowie.
Massive.
Yeah.
I think if I had to single out a favourite song, it would be Bowie's "Ashes to Ashes."
Ah, did you arrive at that at all from the Life on Mars TV show that's also set in the 70s and everybody's dressed in the 70s fashion?
No, and actually, it's been a while since I've watched it. I think I remember I found that. I think because I watched Labyrinth.
Fantastic.
Oh,
Again,
film's wicked fun.
80s film, probably one that Dad put in front of me and went, "You will watch this and you will like this," and lo and behold, I did.
So on to the next question. I think. When you're reading fiction, what themes do you find particularly appealing? Like, what grabs you and won't let go?
I think I like. So, for instance, one of my favourite authors of recent times is Eric LaRocca. And I was really, really honoured / pleased that he did a quote for Into Wreck and Ruin. That was a really big thing for me, because I think, I wouldn't necessarily say that kind of, he describes his work as queer transgressive horror. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's like a genre I'm necessarily compelled towards, but at the same time, something about it clearly works because, his work both terrifies me and makes me want to read more. I think I prefer things where it's all a bit more, body horror, gothic. There's lots of little subgenres, but I think I prefer things when they're all a bit slightly more ineffable.
yeah.
Doctor Who almost breaks the mold in this sense because it's very much it's both chameleonic and there's a very sense of he's a hero and there are these monsters. But actually, I think I prefer stuff that doesn't fit into the kind of there's a monster, stab it kind of archetype. Like, I think if you gave me, for instance, an option between here's an anthology where the overarching kind of theme is vampires, or here's an anthology where the overarching theme is psychological horror, I'd almost certainly pick the psychological horror. And in my own writing, I kind of, I suppose, I class myself as writing weird psychological.
Do you have a favourite movie monster? I think it'd be remiss to keep talking about horror and not ask you that.
Ooh. Monster or character?
Both, either.
I mean, because my favorite film is from 1971. It's called The Abominable Dr. Phibes. Vincent Price plays a mad doctor taking revenge on the nine doctors and nurses who let his wife die, but he decides to kill them all off in the style of the 10 biblical plagues of Egypt.
Oh,
And I think that kind of madness speaks to my brain just brilliantly. Sorry, I'm about to sneeze.
That has it sounds very much like that's a precursor to the film Seven, Fincher's Seven.
I mean, Vincent Price definitely got there first. But yeah, Vincent Price did a lot of films like that. He did one called Theatre of Blood, which is an actor doesn't get an award, so he kills the 9 critics that didn't give him the award in the style of Shakespeare deaths.
Huh. Okay.
There's a lot from that period of kind of Vincent Price kills people in mad and strange ways.
kills 9 people in mad and strange ways.
They're the only two where I think he sticks to 9. In fact, I've just done an article, a tongue-in-cheek article on this for We Belong Dead, who are one of the people I do non-fiction for. So I suppose my answer is read that and you'll find out. But yeah, there's a whole series of them which, you know, he kills people in weird and strange ways. There's a very kind of archetypal detective of they are that British sardonic dry wit. Alfred Marks in Scream and Scream Again quipping, when he eats a chicken sandwich that he clearly dislikes, and he goes, "This chicken wasn't killed; it died of old age." You know, that kind of very mad, strange, but quite dry wit. In terms of actual creature, I mean, the other film that will always be in my kind of top 3 or top 5, I think, will be Event Horizon.
Oh, okay, yeah, great movie.
That kind of, I mean, it's not particularly, I suppose, a solid monster, but that kind of other dimension pouring in.
I guess he does kind of become a monster by the end.
That's
right?
what I mean. It's kind of like, I suppose it's more a force than a monster.
Yeah.
But that to me, I could watch that film over and over again. Yeah, it's one of those ones where it's kind of as soon as I say this, I will change my mind and go, oh, there's that film. No, there's that film. I mean, my favorite, just going through the subgenres, my favorite nature attacks film is one called Prophecy. From 1979, in which the main kind of, that one's a definite monster kind of creature feature thing, but the main monster is a mutated bear.
Oh, top notch.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that's, you know, typical of, you know, a lot of my film choices, but it is my favorite nature attacks film, so I suppose you could count that as a creature feature monster that I adore.
You mentioned your non-fiction just before we move on to Nico's favorite question, because I can feel it coming. I can feel it in the wall. But I thought we could just maybe linger on that just for a moment. You write reviews for various outlets, as we said in the start. I know one of them is Ginger Nuts of Horror. How did you get into that?
I mean, this is going to sound really bad, but I started to want to write reviews because I wanted books and didn't want to have to pay for them. And when you get sent review copies, lo and behold, I mean that's I suppose the glib answer. The more serious answer is, I suppose, it was a way to kind of, I suppose, keep myself going when my fiction wasn't out there. Because it's still keeping my name and giving me something to post and go, look, hey, I've done this. And also, I got an awful lot of support from the horror writing community. They are my found family. And so it's also my way of kind of paying it back. You know, they have been kind to me, so I read their book and I'm kind to them. You know, and I have a rule that if I can't say what, I don't necessarily what the quota is for it. If I can't say enough nice things about a book, I won't review it. I want to only do reviews where I can go, look, I love this book. I want to almost champion it a bit.
Yeah.
So I suppose it started kind of out some hybrid of those. And then also just, I think, you know, in the same way I've got a brain, as I mentioned, that kind of I think of things in spider diagrams. I think I've got a brain that likes drawing connections between things, sees patterns maybe where there aren't any. And yeah, I think sometimes it is, you know, I almost, again, write articles almost like a kind of therapy. So the very first one I did for We Belong Dead was first time I watched Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho after my A-levels. So I'd watched a couple of times during and before, but the first time I watched it after my A-levels, one of my A-level English texts was Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. And I remember watching Psycho. This has got so many Arthur Miller influences. And then I looked online and nobody had talked about this. And to me, it just felt blindingly obvious. And so it was almost like I had to write an article just to prove my point.
It welled up in you and you had to get it out.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so Daryl, who's the editor of We Belong Dead, I met him at the Festival of Fantastic Films and went, look, I've got this article that I wrote, again, you know, as this form of therapy. You know, would you be interested in it? He went, send it over. Ever since then, I've just been doing articles for them. I think there's The other side of that, though, is it's often nice being charged kind of to do things,
Mm.
in the sense that I might look at something and go, "Ooh, I know what I want to write about now." But sometimes it's nice if they go to you going, "Right, I've had an idea for an article, and like they might be films I've never heard of, but I've got to seek them out." And it's almost like the best kind of homework,
Yeah.
A bit
So
of
I
bit of gonzo in it as well if you're having to watch it for the first time for the review.
yeah, and so I think there's one that kind of emerged like that was um so to show you the contrast is another one that I did and I wanted to do was there's a trilogy. David Pirrie, the critic, coined it, called the Sadian trilogy, which is Horrors of the Black Museum, Peeping Tom, and Circus of Horrors. So all from 1959 and 1960, and they're all grouped under that heading because they were very deliberate in pushing the boundaries of how explicit and how sexual they could be. I never watched these films, but I thought it would be a good idea to watch them in the light of having watched film. We live in a world now that includes things like Terrifier, the Saw franchise, things that are really considered utterly kind of, in some corners, people consider these despicable. So this article I wrote was almost like, how do these old films from this era that I love, stand up? And I argue that
Yeah.
they do still stand up. Contrastingly, one that was kind of set for me to do, or kind of Daryl said, "Who wants to do this?" and I went, "Yeah, I don't mind doing that," was an article on Wicker Man wannabes. So the whole point was that he just
Wait,
said
Wickerman wannabes or Wickerman wallabies?
wannabes.
Wannabes. Oh
Wicker
Christ,
Wallabies, Ben. Wicker Wallabies.
that was very nearly complete travesty down under.
No, it was as in there are so many films that seem to pastiche, or TV shows or books that seem to pastiche it or rip it off, and so it was kind of a chance to do a bit of a talking head and go, "Come on, up your game," but at the same time, kind of single out the ones that are doing it well. So it's actually doing non-fiction is quite nice because you get to discover things you wouldn't necessarily do.
Yeah,
Same with the reviews. I often request to do books, but sometimes Ginger Nuts Horror goes, "Do you fancy doing this?" And I go, "Oh, I've never heard of that." Yeah.
it's fascinating to hear the process. I mean, thanks for answering that. I'm gonna give the floor to Nico now for the question, which you will hate. So bear with us.
So we used to dress this one up. We used to say it was a hypothetical, but we can't lie to the people anymore, Ben.
Not anymore.
We're being held hostage by a powerful and capricious bibliomancer. It's a story sorcerer, and he draws his energy from people's love of books. And the only way to satisfy his, let's call them demands, is to give him book recommendations from talented writers such as yourself. So, to save Ben and I some torture, could you answer one question? What novel's closest to your heart right now?
I mean, the one that I suppose again I read it at the right time and has always stayed with me, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, what an answer.
Breaks the mold in the sense that it's not a horror, but it's my kind of humor. I read it at the right time. I just remember absolutely howling with laughter at it. And one of what I regard my greatest piece of writing is my A level English coursework. One of the things we had to do was, or got the option to do, was we either had to do an essay, or we could do on a bit of prose, kind of looking at it in the light of some critical theory like feminism or narrative theory, or we could do a recreative essay, which is you write, say, 1,000 words in the style of your favorite author, and then you do a commentary on why you've done. So I picked post-colonialism as my theory.
Mhm.
What I did was I did 1,000 words in the style of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so I did an entry in The Hitchhiker's Guide on why the babelfish is a oppressed minority, and
Oh,
then
that's
a
fine.
500-word commentary on obviously why I made the choices I did. But that 1,000 words was just like a dream come true. Essentially going, right, you will be marked kind of at an academic level on writing in the style of your favorite author, being nerdy as fuck, having a lot of fun, and it was kind of like that's not homework. That's a pleasure. So yeah, that was. I think that's one of the reasons it's closest to my heart. In that my favourite bit of writing I've probably ever done stemmed from that. Yes, I read it at the right time. My kind of humour. One of, if not my absolute favourite book.
Do you have a favourite character from the series?
I mean, Ford Prefect has the right kind of. I love his zaniness, but I also love Marvin the Paranoid Android.
Mm.
I love. Again, I feel it's very British. You know, you've just been shown the wonders of the universe, and you go around complaining about doors. And you complain that it's all a bit drab, and going, oh dear, I've stubbed my toe. You know, somebody who just wants their creature comforts, and I feel. I think a lot of those characters actually chime with me because it dispels the universe is a wonderful place. They're going, no, I just want to go home, and I don't know. It is very British, but I like that kind of mad sensibility about things.
So I've obviously encountered them a lot, and I know a bit about them. But I know, Nico, you absolutely love this series. I've never asked you though. Is your favorite character Marvin, or is it Zaphod Beeblebrox?
It is Zaphod
I
Beeblebrox.
thought it might be. Right.
The
These two sides of the same coin here, guys.
I always feel like Zaphod is the cool space guy that you think you would be. Arthur is the space guy that we all actually would be.
Yeah.
That's-
What you mean? We'd roam the universe in our dressing gowns? Yes, absolutely.
Just make sure you always know where your towel is, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I love just little things like that. I think it speaks to a mind. There's a certain mind that will be receptive to that, and I happen to have, I think, that mind. I do love Zaphod as well. I think I think you're right. He's the person we'd all loved to be, but
Yeah.
we'd never be. And actually, I think if we were friends with him, he'd piss us off no end.
Oh god, he is a massive wanker.
He's the kind of person you'd go, can you stop being so fucking hyperactive?
Yeah, I do also think I know it's a machine, but the infinite improbability engine is a great character because it does so much to the plot.
I like that whale that goes pop.
and turns into a load of begonias.
I mean, that's a party trick and a half. Fuck bringing out your big knob, like turning into begonias.
I was just trying to work out how, can we do spoilers for the Hitchhiker's Guidebooks? They're quite old.
I think probably if you don't know at least the basic story by now.
Just, the slow reveal that bowl of flowers was actually one of many lives of the same consciousness, frequently ended by Arthur Dent, might be the most unhinged thing that Adams did in those books.
I mean, also, I love that. So again, I think this is one of the things that appealed to me when I wrote in the style of the idea that you go down such rabbit holes with it. In the sense that you don't necessarily know how it's all connected until suddenly it hits you in the face.
Yeah.
There's the stuff about there's when he kind of like a wormhole opened at just the right moment, and that phrase, which was harmless there, just so happened to be a war phrase in that culture, and you go down these spirals with it, and you don't pay any attention to it because you think, oh, this is just an unhinged digression until it suddenly slaps you in the face at some point.
Pleasing symmetry potentially is a good description of that.
I think and maybe this is why I like doing non-fiction. I think you've got a brain that likes things that all connect together and has an influence on one another. Something like that gives you the pleasing brain, like kind of it scratches an itch in your brain.
So, unfortunately, I've got it could be a dry question next, but see what you make of it. What's your editing process? So once you've written a first draft of a short story, what happens
I'm
next?
useless at editing for a start. I should point out because not. I think my first drafts are great because I usually don't, but I find editing yourself a very strange process because it's quite hard to work out just simply whether you're being objective. But in an ideal world, what I tend to do is I tend to write something, leave it for a couple of weeks, to then when I come back to edit it, I can look at it as if it's not me that's written it. Then I do, where possible, always print them off, because first pass is always just kind of going through it, scribbling bits, going, as if it is someone else's work, slating it, going, why on earth did you write that? Wrong choice of words, don't be a dick, various things. But also I think, and I suppose this is almost comes before I write, I like to have not a word cloud of necessarily like words I want to use or anything like that, but for me, when I'm setting out, at least, one of the things that I think is most important is A, dialogue, and B, the tone of a piece. Because I think the tone will, that's where the atmosphere comes in more than I think necessarily splatter or anything else. And so I think it's almost useful to have in your head not even things you're going to rip off, but an idea of a couple of things that have done what you want to do well, if you can find them. So, like, for instance, if I wanted to write tomorrow an occult thriller, I might just write down, like, on a piece of paper, Dennis Wheatley's The Devil Rides Out. I'm not necessarily saying that I'm going to rip off any of that, but in my head I'm going, yes, that's at least the vibe I want to create in my own. So I think it's quite almost, rather than a word cloud, you almost have like a vibe cloud.
Vibe cloud, I like that.
I'm going to ask this because I had a very similar experience, but working as a vocalist. In the studio, I had a producer who would say to me, Ronnie James Dio, and I would move my voice slightly more towards a Dio sound. That he'd go, no, James Hetfield, to sort of slide myself around. Do you ever have to sort of throw a different author down to drag yourself back away to stop yourself sounding too much in the tone of someone else, or are you comfortable holding your voice with just the glimmers of them on it?
I think I'm fairly comfortable holding my own. I mean, one of the reasons I mentioned dialogue is that, obviously, for me, one of the worst things in a book that anyone can do is when it's very clear the author hasn't read their own work out loud.
Oh, yeah.
Because obviously when we read them back, we're not saying them out loud, but in our head there's a voice speaking these words as we read them. And so I think one of those big things is I don't like dialogue that could have just been kind of, don't like generic dialogue. So there's an idea of online, people have something called fists, which is that if you imagine you were in a group chat and somebody rubbed out all the names, you didn't know who was speaking, but you could work out who was speaking by the various styles. So, like, some person might respond using very specific slang words. One person might respond in lots of short texts. Another person might respond in lots of longer, nicely paragraphed texts. So I think I often try and come up with almost a very clear sense of what my character is like in their dialogue, as in, do they speak in short, quick sentences? Do they speak in like longer paragraphs? Are they quite prosaic? Are they quite poetic? Just I think almost those things speak to, you've clearly understood your characters and you've read them and spoken them, as opposed to just, what dialogue do I need to make this scene work?
Yeah.
But other side of the coin, remember how people actually speak.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of, if not necessarily mannerisms, but dialogue that includes lots of wells and ohs and ums, because that is how we speak. And actually, I think you can almost give more away about a character with them starting, saying everything as questions or having lots of ums. I think as long as you're doing it deliberately and you're making a conscious choice, keep your dialogue simple where possible, because not people are simple, but how many people actually speak in grand similes? How many people actually speak as though they are the main character in a movie? Most of us just want to get to the end of our sentence and make sense.
I don't even really stress about that myself.
Okay,
confirm.
most of us want to get to the end of our sentence.
Speaking of getting to the end of things, what's your next project?
Well, I've got 2 short stories that I'm working on at the moment for two different anthologies, which I don't know whether I can actually talk about the details of. So
That's fine.
But whenever I write, I always have a kind of like an end goal in mind. So I think so for instance, I know what my next collection I want it to be. So sometimes the story that I'm writing, it might be for another destination in the meantime. I know in the end it's going to end up in that collection. It's almost just escaped from the asylum a bit early. Sometimes it's just, well, that anthology wants that story, so I'll write it to do it for them. But yeah, I think a lot of the time I have some kind of collection in mind for the end. So I certainly know what I want my next collection to be. Don't know how long it's going to take, but I know what it's going to be. And assuming I don't have any other things in the meantime, they are the things that I will focus on. However, if I then go, oh, there's an anthology call for that, I might switch focus, or I might go, I can send that off a bit early, see where it ends up, and I'll just reprint it later in the day, as it were.
Yeah.
Do you think you might ever write anything longer form, like novella or novel or saga?
I have my novella ideas. I have 3 of them. But actually, I'm really content with writing short fiction.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful.
It's how I think. I saw a panel at Edge Lit last year, and actually there was a consensus on one of the panels that short stories are quite a really difficult thing to write, and I'm like, I was quite surprised by that, because actually I think, yes, they are shorter, and you've got to be more careful with your words, but actually I think there's something very nice about, a novel. I think you often run the risk of spiraling. 400 pages can emerge out of nowhere. Whereas if you've got 3,000 words, you make every word count, but in a good way. You cherry pick your ideas, you work out exactly what's going on. And I think I much prefer that at the moment, because that's just how I think. Though I know my characters' backstories and things, I'm thinking of ideas going, right, what one moment can I pick from these people's lives to make horrible? Or that I can find the horrible in.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't really like short stories here. We don't tell them, we don't.
Well, I mean, okay, to talk about like the story that I did for this, that was, I thought I was being very, very clever with it in some ways, because I thought, right, it's a story that I've only got 1,000-ish words, which is quite short for me, because I tend to hit about 4,000, 5,000 with mine. That's where most of mine generally end up. Obviously, I've done some that are actually a lot longer than that, and I've done some that are shorter, but generally that's where they end up. So I thought, right, what I'll do is I'll do a story where I can almost, the whole feeling is it's just an ongoing cycle. And so I can take one snapshot from it, any bit. And then, of course, I went away with it because I wanted to add lots and lots and lots and talk about more about this weird family. But I think it was almost like, in my head, in terms of what the actual plot was going to be, it was always just going to be the discovery of this mad experiment and it all slowly coming to life. I knew I was never going to show the end result of that. And I knew vice versa, I was never going to show the creation of the experiment either. It was, I knew going in it was going to be a snapshot. And that's, I think, how my mind works. Even if you're watching a TV episode, how often does the villain's plan start as the episode begins? Usually the villain is in the middle of their plan and then they're stopped. Everything in life is a snapshot. And so actually I think short stories are far more true to life in some ways than long expansive novels. Sorry, I don't know whether that actually answers the question, but
yeah, I think it is. No,
That's all for me.
So we're back around to the question that we had at the end of the last one, which is those people that are listening, they've heard your story from the last episode. We've done a bit of a dive into your approach to writing, but where can they go to keep up to date with your news?
Yeah, so Phantasmagoria magazine, the website for that has my latest collection, Into Rack and Ruin on, and my first collection, which I co-wrote with my dad. We don't tell people who wrote which story, but the one that I co-wrote with him, that's called Uneasy Beginnings, and that's from Black Shook Books. So they're the 2 ones that are obviously not solely me, because one of them is written with my dad, but they are the ones that have just me in. I've been in a couple of other anthologies, but they are the ones that have me a bit more. centric.
Front and center, yeah.
Yeah. But they are both also available from Amazon. Interact Ruin was launched last year, and that's certainly the most recent one. That's the one. I mean, I'm proud of all the things I put out in the world. In that sense, because I wouldn't put them out if I wasn't proud of them. But I suppose, it's not a magnum opus. It isn't anything grandiose like that. But I think if people want to understand how my brain works, that's a very good place to start, because it has, there is a range of, I think, themes in there. There's a range of genres that I tried to kind of hop a bit. Sometimes deliberately, sometimes I ended up at the end going, well, that's fun.
We will say, listeners, do only try and understand a writer's mind at your own risk. We take no responsibility for the results.
Yeah, but I suppose in terms of how I feel about it, that is the most undiluted form of my brain in fiction so far. So I think if you want to understand how my fiction works, that's a very good place to start.
Well, I've got to say, Ben, thank you very much for your time this evening. And I want to wish you good luck for your final exams as well, for your degree, and all the best for the future, including in that your writing career, which seems like it's absolutely fascinating, and I'll be following it closely.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, but by the time FantasyCon comes around in October, I will hopefully be doing my postgrad, which feels terrifying.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, and we'll definitely see you soon.
Yes, right. Thank you both.
Safe travels, my friend.
Breathy. I liked it. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?